Welcome to Education Secrets. I'm Dr. Anya Grigas. So today we'll be learning about what it takes to get your children accepted at Oxford and Cambridge. There's a reason I'm wearing my Oxford sweatshirt today. And we'll also burst some myths about homeschooling. A lot of people have this fear that if they homeschool their kids, they'll have difficulty later being accepted at competitive universities or even integrating into the real world. So our guest today will really help us burst those myths. Because she's been homeschooling her children since, she'll tell us all about it since they were young, and she has had the most incredible results with them. So I wanted to introduce to you today our guest, Emma White. So she has been a homeschooling mom of 2 kids who were accepted at Oxford and Cambridge. She's also the founder of Mark My Papers, a company that operates in 32 countries and creates learning materials and provides examiners for individuals and schools. And a lot of this is also for the homeschooling community. So Emma, welcome. And it's so nice to have you all the way from England.
Yes, all the way from England.
So I wanted to ask you, first, I would love to hear your story. When you started homeschooling your 2 sons and, what ages they were at the time, what made that decision for you and how it all went for you.
Okay, well, I think like many parents, we started home education through adversity. It wasn't something I'd ever planned to do. In retrospect, it was probably the best decision I've ever made in my life. But it was a family breakup, which was particularly difficult. And the children had been at school before in multiple countries, moved around a lot. And I felt that by giving my own home education, I could sort of take control and give them security and direction. So we started in 2015 when the boys would have been 12 and 10. Now, that in itself posed a bit of a problem because in the English system, the younger one was in Key Stage 2 at the end of primary school. The older one was just starting secondary school, so Key Stage 3. I didn't have the money for external tutors, so I decided to take it all on myself and trying to cross-teach 2 children at 2 different levels with a 2.5-year age gap, whilst keeping opportunities open across all subjects was a bit of a challenge. But it got easier, and I think like a lot of home educating parents, there's no right or wrong. You have to find your own feet and your own way of what works for you. So I couldn't say to you, here is the Bible on how to home educate, because what we did work for us. If I had the chance to do it again, I'd probably do a few things differently. But we sort of muddled through, then got going, got fast, got brilliant results, and I couldn't be more pleased with the outcome.
Well, tell us a little bit more of the details because, you would say, we muddled through a little bit. So you actually did pursue a very academic path with your kids, from what I understand, because when it came to, they passed all the national UK examinations, the A levels, and so on. And at least here in the United States, there's often maybe a myth or a stereotype, and that, homeschoolers aren't really doing much academics. They're having fun, they're playing around, or the fear that many parents, again, have that I'm actually, if I do homeschool, I'm probably not really going to have great results in terms of pure academics because maybe I don't have the capabilities to teach, these different subjects. So tell us a little bit more details, because again, you've had a great success and clearly the results, acceptance at Oxford, acceptance at Cambridge clearly demonstrates that you really delivered in terms of learning for your children.
Well, I, at the time, was a big believer in school. I wanted them to go down the conventional independent school route in England. That became impossible. At the time, it was the least of our concerns with everything else going on. But I wanted to keep a traditional curriculum because I believe that would keep opportunity open for them. My biggest concern was removing opportunity for them. If one wanted to be a lawyer or a doctor, an accountant, a policeman, a teacher, they needed conventional schooling and I had to deliver it. So at Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3, we followed the basic curriculum, English, math, science, added geography, added history, added religious studies. And then when we came to GCSE, by then we were doing 11 subjects, which single-handedly on your own as a mother who's no teaching experience It wasn't a case of teaching. It was really a case of learning together, of motivating them to join in with me and find out, to discover. And I think that's one of the key points about what we've done. It's never been a teacher-pupil relationship. It's been a team of finding out. My biggest challenge was the younger one. He was only 10 at the time. They were just ordinary kids. I wouldn't say, there's lots of schools we'd apply to that they hadn't got into in the past. So I can't say, they were hugely academically capable. But I had to try and bring him up to be the level of the older one so that I could teach them together. And very carefully, I got his sort of buy-in to join in, to learn. And I have to say now, he's 16 and going to Cambridge. So we more than did it, if you know exactly how. All I can say, it's by creating an incredible love of learning, a thirst for knowledge, a confidence that they can do it, and a belief, which I think has been so important through lockdown, you don't need a teacher standing in front of you. You can learn. It's all out there. It's all available. You need a lot of motivation and patience that if you don't understand first time, let's have another go. Let's have another go. I would say we've actually learned more on the subjects we found difficult than on the ones we found easy. We've learned resilience, we've learned application. For example, Ozzy, my oldest, struggled with maths, physics and biology, but then got A stars in all of them. And that was because we took it on a real challenge and said, right, we're going to get really good at these. I'm not particularly good at them either. Ernie, on the other hand, did them all age 14 and found them really easy. So it was sort of just pulling everything together and keeping the momentum, keeping the focus, most importantly, keeping it enjoyable. That's what we've achieved, I think.
And I think that was maybe a difficult part because your children had different inclinations. And again, your eldest, as you mentioned, he ended up at Cambridge at Christ College, reading history and modern languages. Yeah. So really more the humanities. And your younger Ernie went on to study natural sciences at Pembroke.
Exactly. And that was, I would have said at the beginning that was going to be a huge barrier. But once you get around the head, I sometimes think, if you're a teacher, you probably think, this is going to be impossible because I am a physics teacher or I'm a biology teacher. And I know these schools want to get people with PhDs in each subject because that, you need these people, these absolute experts. I'm not an expert in any of them and I'm particularly weak in sciences, but I knew how to motivate Ernie. I discovered he was particularly good at maths when I started doing simultaneous equations with him. I very quickly realised after about 10 minutes he could just do them and he was leaving me for dead. So I just say, well, you just carry on. Go on, try and now do this, try and do some surds. And he'd be, yep, okay, great, I can do them. So even though they've got massively different skills, and my skills are far more akin to Ozzy's, he did A-levels in history, geography, French and politics, and I could run with him there. I couldn't run with Ernie, but as a very capable child and a motivated child, he just taught himself, which people find quite hard to believe at that level, but he did.
What do you think was that motivation secret? What do you think made your children and maybe particularly, especially Ernie, so self-motivated that he was able, especially to teach himself and tackle a lot of these difficult subjects?
I think part of it's inherent in them. I think they went to a very good primary school. They went to a school called St. Margaret's in Calm, which is the prep school for a girls' school called St. Mary's. And the headmistress there, I think, was quite unique, Karen Corden, because when Ernie was 7, he couldn't read. He really couldn't read and he couldn't write. And I was reading a book at the time on stroke victims. I'm like them. I'm a massive reader. I'll read absolutely anything. And I said to Mrs. Corden, I don't want him to feel he can't do it. He mustn't feel he's failing here. So let's not put him on the table for the special needs children or anything. Will you work with me in trying something new? I want him to trace Star Wars victim or tracing anything, but he was mad about Star Wars. So every night we were tracing Star Wars characters. And about a month later, he could read. Now you might say, well, those neurons in his brain might have clicked anyway. But I think the trick was he never felt negative about it and he never felt he was failing. So it was a massive success. Only you can read now. And then I insisted every day he read for 20 minutes at the end of every day with me. Kept doing it. And then he was away with it. He's now probably the most phenomenal reader ever. At 16, his lockdown challenge, he read all 38 Shakespeare plays. Now, I couldn't possibly do that myself. I would find that really quite boring. But they're not me. He loves it, and he's massively interested in philosophy. His recent interest is Roman law, and he still has all his sciences running concurrently. But I think the trick was we broke down the demarcation between school and home. And I started this early enough. Teenage sort of angst hadn't set in, no negativity. I could keep them motivated. There was no negative influences. And I'm naturally really positive when I'm teaching. It's all an adventure. It's all leading to good things. I wouldn't ever say, oh, God, this is boring, or this is this, or this is that. Not to them anyway, even though sometimes I've probably felt it myself. It was all sold to them as, this is brilliant. We're really up for it. We're going to do our best. I kept the lessons short, never more than half an hour at a time. And just sort of, it sort of all came together. Now, by the time they were sort of 14, 15, they're teaching themselves, and they didn't really need me. And they would run their lessons on for much longer, to the point where actually my bigger concern was, look, I think you need to stop now. An emergency essay coming on, I'm going to, got to go and do it. Love it. Which is fantastic. And it's put them in a great position university-wise. But there's never been any pressure. And that might sound really odd because, like you said at the beginning, when we first started home educating, the general consensus of opinion, which people accuse all home educators of, oh, they're not doing anything, they're just having a great time wandering around the shops, and they're anti-school and all this. And you couldn't have been further from the truth. Then when we started getting good results when they were young, oh, I bet they're hot-housing them, those children have no life. And it's all this sort of negative approach to home education. And all we've actually done is keep a love of learning. That's all we've done. And I think when kids enjoy it and they don't see demarcation between home and school and the physicality of school and some of the elements they don't like, they can achieve things you would never have thought possible. I'm astonished by what they've achieved. I really am. Very proud too.
Oh, absolutely. But I think this love of learning, it's what every single parent would like to instill in their children. I mean, regardless of whether they're homeschooling or their child is in traditional education. So do you have some tips for parents of what they could do in order to try to instill this love of learning? And you did mention that some of it could be, innate, but I think parenting and the environment had a lot to do with it.
I think the one thing I would say to them is get them reading and model the behaviour yourself. We as a family, in the summer when, the schools are not busy and I'm not busy, we have a break for an hour every day at 4:00 and we all read together. And it's something we've always done. They've always seen me reading. Books are hugely important in my life. I remember years ago on a train in Austria, I lost a book on Mary Tudor, and I went to such great lengths to find it. And they were all involved in, how are you going to get this book back? The book was crucial. I mean, it would have just been easy to order another one on Amazon, but they knew that this mattered. Reading is huge, and it's a gateway to so many other interests. They're not like me in terms of their interests. So, for example, you're talking about Ernie and his science. But I knew that if I could get him reading, he can find out and explore and do more. He didn't need me to be fascinated by science, because I actually find a lot of it quite hard to understand. I certainly couldn't keep up with him now. But it's the reading that's the key to everything. And I think you have to be quite insistent when they're young. If a child is not a natural reader, I would say, try and get them to read for just 20 minutes a day, every day. And if they're reading a book they don't enjoy, after 10 pages, put it down and get another one. Don't make them find it a chore. Don't make them think, oh God, I've got to read that again tonight. I really wasn't enjoying it. There's thousands of books out there. You won't like all of them. So if they don't like it, stop and choose another one. And it doesn't matter what it is. We all get there eventually. You do see a lot of parents who are hugely pressured and they want their child to be the best at everything. And I think one thing we did is relax. I didn't really mind. I wanted them to have opportunity, but we'd sort of opted out of the race in a lot of ways. So they didn't feel education was competitive. They didn't feel they were under huge pressure to pass exams to get into a school to be judged. They're just doing it with me at home. And then when we came back into the race and doing public exams, we were astonished. Ernie, on his NSAA application for Cambridge, he was in the top % across the world for both maths and chemistry. Now, for somebody who's 16 and not had lessons, I was thinking, oh my God, but he has spent hours teaching himself. So he's obviously very capable, although at primary school he wouldn't have been in the top set for anything. So fair play to him. He's done really well.
Well, and you've given so much, I think, insight really in trying to model that level of learning, and really, I think, emphasizing that reading is the gateway.
Yeah.
But I do get a sense that your children were gifted, if I understand correctly, or is that not a term you would use?
When you say gifted, my understanding of it, I'd say someone like Alan Turing or Mozart was gifted, unusually gifted. They have an ability. We all have an ability to learn and retain information to a greater or lesser extent. They learn in very different ways. Ernie has an almost encyclopedic recall of stuff. He did his geography GCSE age 12, and I remember him coming out, and Ozzy had done it at the same age. Sorry, 2 years older, but the same sitting. And they were talking about the paper. Now, this was a single 3-hour exam, which I thought was a bit of a big ask for him. But I said, well, let's just get one out of the way because I think you'll be fine. Okay. And then when he came out, he recalled every single question on the paper in detail, and he could still do it 4 days later. And he did the same with his NSAA. He was talking to someone about it, and he was recalling every single maths and chemistry question in verbatim. It was bizarre how he would remember. So he has a huge ability to retain information and a love of retaining that information. Ozzy learns quite differently. Ozzy has to understand the whole before you can actually ask him to do anything on it. So I realised it would give him stress if I took an element out of it to test him on it. So say we were doing the American West in history. We learnt the whole specification for it before I started asking him. He had to sort of read all into it and understand everything about it rather than remember it, which was a different approach to it. I knew if I tested him and he felt he couldn't do it, he would start panicking because he's quite stressy about not being able to deliver. So I had a slightly different approach with him. But yes, clearly they're both very talented. I think lots of children are very talented, but where it goes wrong is they have this demarcation between school and learning. And even at sort of Oxbridge level, you see some who aren't that passionate about it. Some are, but a lot of them are not really that passionate about what they're learning. They have an ability to remember it, but I think Oxbridge is actually looking for people who want to stay and do a PhD. So they're wanting people who are really committed to it.
Well, so it was really, I think, your talent in finding the different learning styles of your children and their different predispositions. Can you maybe give some tips how parents can try to see their children's strengths and weaknesses and their learning style?
Well, I think it probably comes from spending so much time with them. When you're with them sort of working at a desk for sort of 4 hours a day, you've got one on each side, and you'll just notice things. I noticed particularly Ozzy had to have a full understanding of content. So for example, when he went on to A-level and he really wanted to carry on with America, he was learning about Abraham Lincoln. He got about 10 extra books out, so he knew more about Abraham Lincoln than any. We even ended up giving him the nickname Stovepipe at the end because he was so obsessed with Abraham Lincoln. We knew it all. And then he could deliver essays.
How old was he there? How old was he there roughly when he had this?
16, when we had this obsession with Abraham Lincoln. So it was great. I bought into it too. But I just think you will get a report from school, and school's a big factory learning process. They don't really know your kids, not like you can. And I think by offering an individual bespoke education, I didn't have access to expert tuition, but I could see how they were learning and I could make it comfortable for them and I could take the stress away. So I didn't over-test them. I didn't put them under pressure. I would never make them do an exam in timed situation. I would always think, if I do this right, by the time you're in that exam hall, you will easily do it in the time allowed. But I'm not going to make you uncomfortable in making you worry about it, because to me, you'll achieve far more if you think this is good and you're up for it and enjoying it. And that seemed to work. But going back to your question, I think it's only if you spend a lot of time sitting down with them and working with them, things will become apparent in them that you think, that's a bit different. My two are hugely different in the way they learn, but I could see how I could help both of them.
Absolutely. But at the same time, homeschooling their children, it's not an option for a lot of parents.
Yeah.
Because of work commitments, single parents, or there could be a number of reasons, or just not a task many are prepared to undertake. It's very daunting, I think, for many. I mean, for me now, my children are independently schooled, and it's not something I ever thought I would do when they were much younger. But I wanted to see, what type of tips do you think you would give parents who are not homeschooling? How could they get more involved, see their children's talents and strengths?
I think you do half an hour. If you can find half an hour, and it really doesn't need to be more than that. More is probably not enjoyable for them. In an evening, you could spend one evening doing half an hour of reading with them, half an hour of very basic maths. I think a lot of parents, and I do blame schools for this, they have this sort of atmosphere where they make out it's so difficult that you wouldn't be able to do it. We're brilliant, we're the teachers, we've all got PhDs, we're better than you, leave it to us. And I remember going to one of our public schools here, being private, an independent school in England, and thinking,
yes.
So this is all very impressive, but we're trying to reach the attainment of an average 16-year-old here. I'm not trying to get a PhD in rocket science. This is attainable. So once you're fully immersed in it, if you decided, right, I'm going to go through the whole GCSE maths or biology specification, you become quite familiar with it and you get quite good at it. So you can then work a little bit. I know people haven't got the time, but half an hour. See how they write things down. See how they're processing information. See where they're panicking, and see if you can take some of that angst away. And I think one of the problems with the British curriculum, it's so data and exam driven that it puts teachers under pressure, it puts kids under pressure, and it's not actually about the results, it's about the data. That this huge uncomfortable feeling that children are feeding off, we took all of that away. So I just watch how they work. What are the key points that make them uncomfortable? And with mine, it was very apparent. But as you say, I was with them all day, every day. Our conversations would then bleed into the evening. We'd still be talking about King Richard and King John at dinner time. We'd be talking about Hitler. We'd be talking about osmosis, everything we were discussing it all the time. So they never saw a difference. It was just how we were living. But if you can spend a little time observing, working with them, even if it's a geography paper on coastal erosion, just work with them and see how they're attempting it. But it is for me, because I think, because I joined them in Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3, I was learning again. Now, if you suddenly plonked into the middle of, I'm going to help my child with A-level politics, you're sort of thrown in at the deep end. I'd grown back into my education with them. So that made it easier for me to see how they should be answering the questions. Because, for example, when you're faced with, say, a history question, and you show your parents and they would not know how it should be answered in terms of what the specification demands. They may be able to help on the content, but they wouldn't know what the examiner's looking for in terms of how you're going to approach this answer. But because I've sort of grown with it, yes, I have learnt how to answer all these questions and support them. So I think half an hour a day, try and immerse yourself into a bit where you can, will make a difference. But I know that's hard for parents. I know it's difficult.
That's a very, I think, doable suggestion. I really think, the tip of just spend 30 minutes a day and really, touch base with them, see how they're learning, see what their style is, see where they're struggling. I think that's a great tip for our listeners. Now, I wanted to ask you, what, when we think about the younger years, when we are thinking about, children under the age of 12, which would be elementary school in the United States, for example, what do you think are the key personal or academic skills that parents need to instill in their children?
Again, I think reading, I keep coming back to that because I do honestly think it's the absolute key to anything. And I also think, obviously, they've got to understand It does require commitment and motivation. Nothing in life is easy. And I must have spent hours with the boys at my side saying, there are no shortcuts. You are going to spend a lot of time revising. Schools sometimes, they think they want to make it entertaining. I was reading this article the other day about somebody who decided, even for A-level, which is for 18-year-olds, for English literature, they asked the kids, students, 18-year-olds, to bake a cake according to one of the themes of English literature, which I thought, well, by 18 they should have a bit more of a buy-in that they don't have to be really baking a cake to.
Yes.
I think there's a big blurred line between engaging and entertaining. It's got to be engaging. I think we kept them engaged. I think we kept them listening. I see it's all over Facebook all the time with this massive. I don't know, you probably have it still the same in America. There's a huge competitive drive to get children into selective schools. I can understand it because they get good results. But I do think for the children's point of view, some will thrive on it, but others will feel, oof, I'm not enjoying it. You probably can't even tell, but subconsciously they won't be enjoying it. And I've worked a lot with horses in my life. And it's quite interesting, but one of the biggest things, I remember going to northern France to visit a chap who's breeding Connemara ponies. And a lot of the things he said to me stuck for teaching kids too. And he said to me, I can show you the most brilliant pony ever over a fence. I can show you things that would win everything. He said, but they've got to want to do it. And he said, and that's your job. You've got to keep them wanting to do it. And it's the same with kids. If you throw too much academic stuff at them, if you're making it too pressured, too uncomfortable, they will subconsciously lose interest. And you see the pressure on kids as young as 9, 10, pressure. If they have that ability there, and if you keep them happy and motivated, they will do it. But you're in charge and you can kill that through going to get them into this school, I'm going to make them do this exam. And you just sort of think, okay, but they mustn't feel that pressure. But, I do understand it's competitive, schools vary, you want the best, all parents do. Most people aren't in a position to home educate, nor would they want to. It's a big undertaking. But now looking back at it, the success we've had is down to no pressure and enjoyment. And it's just as simple as that, nothing more.
Wow, I think it's for many parents that is even difficult to grasp, the fact that you can achieve the very highest results as you have with your children and to do it without pressure and without, that sense of competition, to actually do it through enjoyment. Can you, I don't know, maybe elaborate a little bit more? Because again, I think most people will just find that, again, kind of a type of task they'll have difficulty even thinking how they could actually achieve this without pressure. And you've mentioned, of course, the love of learning, the love of reading. What else? And maybe some of the personal characteristics you can instill in your children that will help them.
I think you've got to try and find what they're good at and where their skills lie. Ernie, for example, loved Lego. Like I say, we had Lego Star Wars. We had so much Lego. But I was sort of aware, if I let this run, this was going to turn into Warhammer, and then it was probably going to turn into a job in a toy shop selling Lego. Mm-hmm. And I knew he was really needs a bit more ambitious than that if he wanted to be able to pay his bills when he was older. So I remembered my father, when I was young, was really interested in astronomy, and he'd take me out. We lived in the remote countryside, so we had really good skies, and he taught me a lot there. And I sort of pulled Ernie towards let's try and get these interests into something like astronomy, something like physics, chemistry, and grow them from there. So a lot of it comes from the parents of trying to see where your kids' interests lie and then have a sort of offshoot that might lead to something academic to introduce them to. Now, when I was a child, I was fascinated by racehorse pedigrees, which I was like a walking encyclopedia on the North American stud book, which had absolutely no value in it whatsoever. And my parents thought, oh, that's fantastic, but it wasn't actually fantastic. It was a complete waste of time. And it could have done with being sort of slightly pulled towards a better, more productive direction, because I obviously had the memory, but you just need a parent to guide you towards something that might lead to an interesting career that you enjoy. Now, at the moment, Ozzy, now he's at Cambridge, he's really got into maritime history. We're still fascinated by Abraham Lincoln. But we've now moved, and he's actually got a teacher, his American history teacher, who's called Robert Lee, which we found really quite amusing. So he's now into maritime law. Sorry, not maritime, maritime history, which he now is looking, he's joined the Law Society because he's thinking of maritime law. And this is something, it grows, but it grows from you. Don't make it all about school and academia. Try and persuade them of where it might take them. Try and make everything relevant. Everything we've done at school, every subject we've touched on, I've explained to them how it's relevant. So if they're analysing a piece of English language text, for example, and they're saying, oh, this is, why have we been asked this? What's this question about? And I said, because it's the basis of, if you do law, it's about you reading and understanding a statement, you arguing on the pinhead about the meaning of a sentence that might put someone in jail, get them out of jail, win a case. And they go, oh yeah, okay, right, I understand it. So what I'm saying is, whilst you're feeding these children your academic journey, show them where it can take them in life. Show them the interesting things it can lead to. It's got to bleed into one thing, because I think school and teaching is school and teaching. And then kids get to the end of it and it's real life, and they don't bring any of those skills with them. They sort of, oh, right, we can leave those at the door now. We're in the big wide world. The trick is to make them pull it all along with them and grow into it. Ernie was saying to me the other day, he's beyond his science, he reads lots of philosophy books, and he's reading one about Roman law. He said, I'm actually getting quite interested in this. And if you do a law degree, you learn about Roman law. And I thought, well, let's stick with natural sciences for now. But if you see what I'm saying, I've made them see opportunity in whatever they're doing. I've made them carry it through beyond academia, that it all pulls together for them. And that's one of the things I think I have given them that they probably wouldn't have got at school. They see the relevance in everything. I've always tried to make it, because a lot of people say to me, oh God, when will I ever use algebra? And I say, well, you may not, but there's loads of people out there who will. You're saying this on Facebook. What about coding? It's so trying to sort of make them understand the relevance, trying to take their skills and talents and bleed it into something that's productive, that will suit them, I think is very valuable. Try and see academia.
I received two, I think, very clear tips from you. And one, I feel that you pointed that look to your child's interest, and that could be something completely unacademic, but try to then lead from that interest, whatever it could be, horses, could be Legos, could be something like that. Try to lead that does translate into, growing and learning and school.
Exactly.
And then the second, when they're doing something academic, purely academic subject, try to show them that connection to the real world. So it just doesn't become a very abstract thing they're learning.
Try and pull it together so they don't see education as school. Education comes to an end, then you're in the world. It's all got to pull along with them. They've got to understand the relevance to everything they do. Ernie was writing an email the other day and he wanted to run by me. I immediately said, come on, Ernie, purpose, tone, audience. Go right back to your GCSE basics. He goes, oh yeah, of course. So they're applying it all the time. Everything we've learned, it's just everyday life. And that's where I think parents compartmentalise stuff. They have their kids at home with them and they're doing home things. And then there's school, which is quite separate. And I was quite aware during lockdown, a lot of my friends who've got kids at school felt that school was intruding into their home. They saw it as a bit of an alien thing. Or I don't really want this school, push it out the way. And I think if you can try and sort of pull it all together in a positive way with clear outlines as to where it can take them, that's quite a good message for them. It certainly has been for us.
To what extent would you put the onus on the parents rather than, let's say, the school or the teacher?
Right, so quite a big question. I mean, I think both. I think it can have a huge influence. I think some parents are not interested enough. I think some parents are too interested. I think there's a tendency, particularly with home education, where you know what you were good at and your talents, and you therefore think, I'm going to inflict those on my children. I didn't enjoy maths. They won't enjoy maths. But your children are not you. And I think it's getting to know them and see what would suit them, how you can help them. Yeah, it's a very big question, but some parents are all over their kids and academically and intellectually, and some are not remotely interested. Education is all and everyone; it's huge, so it's quite a big question to answer.
I mean, it is. It is. I think it's from my perspective. I think actually a lot of parents assume that the education will happen in school or the teacher is primarily responsible. So my view is actually that a lot of the foundation gets built at home. It gets built at home with the values you instill, what you're modeling, the environment you have, the identity you develop in your child. So especially in the younger years, I would actually place more emphasis on the role of the parent rather than the school.
I think also that is a good point, because I think there's a tendency, and you see it in some of these pages on Facebook, where parents blame the school. They feel the school should be utterly responsible for every achievement. Their child's brilliant, their child's bored, it's the school's fault. And I sort of feel, no, take a bit of ownership. It's your child. It has one life. You can't change the world. Education is a massive thing. It has to be a sort of one size fits all, because it's a weakness-based system. You're trying to accommodate everyone. So the very capable people will have a problem with it, and the less capable people will have a problem. It's pitched in the middle. So if you think it's too fast for you or too slow for you, try and take a bit of ownership and help your child through it, rather than sit there and sort of blame the school, blame the teachers. You see posts all the time where people are saying things like, oh, it ought to teach me why doesn't it teach a child how to service a car? Or why doesn't it teach you how to fill in a tax return? And you're thinking, well, some of this can be learnt outside school. Schools are very much becoming almost like social workers. We're throwing everything at teachers. It's very unfair. We're expecting them to teach. You've got to get good results. You've got the mental health part. You've got the nurturing part. It's almost like parents are abdicating all responsibility and saying, right, school, you do it for me. I think, no, you have a responsibility too. You can do your part. Work with the school. If you think they're not pushing your child hard enough, try and set them a little bit of extra work in the evenings or at weekends where you pull them forward. But I work with schools, and I feel quite sorry for a lot of them that they do get a lot of unnecessary parent bashing, because the parents feel it's the school's job to provide for everyone. It just, whether you think it should or not, it can't happen because of the numbers. So you're better just looking after your own corner.
Absolutely.
Your own
Absolutely.
child.
There are a lot of parents who do dream about their kids going to, the most competitive universities, who are trying to set up their children for academic excellence. What advice would you give to them? How should they get started in their early years? And then in the later years as well?
Okay, well, I think you've got to keep an open mind, because it might not be for them. I certainly wouldn't have thought when Oz and Ernie were young that they would be Cambridge material. It became apparent later on. And once it did become apparent that they were very capable, I started looking in year 10. So that's the year that you're going, so probably 14, 15.
14, 15.
The Oxford and Cambridge are what I would call specialist universities. You have to choose a subject and be utterly passionate about it. What they're looking for is people who are prepared to go the extra mile. I know Ozzy had read 28 further books around his subject for his history and French literature. It's massively competitive. I think you have to tell the children from the start, even though I felt Oz and Ernie had a good chance, there is a 75% chance of failure. And I think failure can be a good thing for a child. I think you teaching them to deal with failure is good, but you do feel it's such a massive undertaking to apply. And with these particular universities, because they're specialists, they're not interested in extracurricular stuff. They're not interested that you've probably played football at a high level or that you enjoy sailing or climbing. They're not interested. They are only interested in your academic ability in that particular subject. I think you've also got to make sure, as a home educator, a lot of people try to do what I would say is the bare minimum. That makes sense in some ways because it's expensive to do these exams. So they will only do 4 or 5 GCSEs, but you do everybody applying has got 9 or 10 A stars. So home education is definitely a choice, not an excuse. So you have to be on a par with everybody else who's applying. So I'd say start early, look round, visit, make sure you choose subjects that underpin what you want to do. Say, for example, Ozzy wanted to do history and modern languages, so he did history, French, geography and politics. They all sit together. Now, if he'd chosen art and drama, that would have weakened his chances, even though he may have had a particular enjoyment for that subject. Those universities want to see that you've actually taken the right subjects on the way. And they offer lots of masterclasses online that you can observe, you can join in, where they're pushing that point all the time. If you want to do physical natural sciences, you need maths and further maths. If you haven't got them, you have less of a chance. It's as simple as that. So I'd say start early, keep an open mind, because you might look around and feel it's not for you. If you can, visit them. If you can't, do the online open days. We've visited lots of universities, made a full day out of it. And yes, plan early, but I've always set the boys up for the chances are that it might not happen, so that we could deal with the disappointment. You have to do interviews, you have to do assessments and everything. It's quite pressured, and it sort of you have to start. We did our NSAA exam in November for a January result. So we were working all last summer on getting ready for that exam. You have to be quite committed to it. And then you also, at the end, you sort of think, if you fail and you don't get in, do you apply again, or do you move on and go to somewhere sort of less highly esteemed? But I do think the process of applying and going through the whole rigmarole, as you'll know with Oxford, does improve you academically massively. Going through the journey, having to do those assessments, having to go through the interviews, I think it brings you to a much better level than it would if you didn't do it. But yes, I also think look carefully at all the colleges, see which one suits you, have a look at the directors of studies, see if there's one who has a particular interest that you're interested in. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think if you do a really good job, I think we probably, if anything, we over-prepared. That was because it was just down to us and we don't have any help. I organised for both the boys once a month to speak to a mentor. They'd finished all their content for their exams, but just to speak to somebody who could sort of pull them up, to the next level, draw them forward a bit and put them under the pressure of what it would be like with an interview. So it's probably worth doing that. I'm talking from a home educated perspective. The better schools have this all laid on for you anyhow. They know
the better private schools.
The better private schools, but interestingly in England, there's definitely a bit of a drive, I think, to try and have a more inclusive load of children going there. So they're broadening their net. They're looking for children who have got that. It's not about taking a lower standard by any means. Everybody's results, you have to be fabulous. But if you've come at it from a slightly harder perspective, you've had a harder journey to get there. If you've been sent to a top private school and had a very privileged life and get 4 A stars, they would think that's less impressive than someone who's been to a not so good school or had some very difficult things happen or self-taught and got 4 A stars. So they're looking for people who are showing commitment and passion and drive. Making it a bit harder for a child is not a bad thing. So if you have been to a particularly difficult school and not had the opportunity, that can play to your favour because you can explain that. Particularly Cambridge, it has an extenuating circumstances form, which we use to explain our choices for home education and the difficulties that had put us in the position, to make sure that they knew it was a choice we'd made through adversity, rather than because we were some sort of Russian oligarch who decided we were going to home educate and have endless tutors helping us. So it's important to make sure if you've come from a difficult journey, that's a good thing, but make it very clear to the university that you have and what you've learned from it, what qualities it's given you, that it's given you tenacity, resilience, drive. So start early, don't be over-ambitious, don't equally be under-ambitious. If you think you're capable, have a go.
Well, and I want to emphasize, you said commitment, passion, and drive, and
Yeah.
also hardships you've overcome. And that's for, you've discussed the Oxford and Cambridge system, but here in the US, it's, the Ivy League,
Mm.
or, equivalent colleges like Stanford and MIT. And, it sounds like it's a very similar process and they're looking for similar things. I mean, well, I personally went to the Ivy League for undergrad, to Columbia, and then for Oxford
Mm.
for my master's and PhD. So again, it's looking for students who truly have a passion and know what they want to pursue and have the motivation, the drive to do so. So I think that's also great, more universal advice, but certainly for those who are interested in the Oxford Cambridge system. And because when you talk about that passion, I mean, what advice would you give your parents how to help your children find their passion or their talent? Something that was really going to drive them further.
And I think as they go through, they're going to find a subject that they enjoy. So join in with them in looking into it. What is needed here. I've been with Oz and Ernie every step of the way, helping them with this application process. And another quality they're looking for is, are you teachable? If you're a bit of a know-all and they sort of think, oh God, you've got to be somebody they would like to work with. They're going to have supervisions with your tutorials and have a real investment in your time there. So you've got to be teachable. You've got to be willing, again, wanting to do it. That's really
That's
important.
something unique to the Oxford Cambridge system, because there a lot of your education, even as an undergrad, is one-on-one tutorials.
Yes.
So it is about that relationship you're going to
Yes.
have with your professor and your tutor. And that's why actually, I think what type of a person you are you teachable, is important.
Yes.
As they're selecting
it's huge
students.
importance. I know that from experience that some children, the word they don't like is arrogant. They don't like somebody who seemingly knows more than they do. So I think even if you think you do, you probably have to. Well, you wouldn't do anyway, but you'd have to tone it down and come across as teachable. So as a parent, and I think a lot of parents do this, join in, get the prospectus, read through with them. Children are children, and I know there's this sort of big school of thought that says let them make their own mistakes. I try to not let them make mistakes I've made, because I don't see any value in I'd like them. We went through the whole prospectus, we looked at every college, we looked at every director of studies. Ozzy really liked he'd read a book by a man called Professor David Reynolds at Christ for history, and he was again on America. So he really wanted to be interviewed by this person, and he was interviewed by him in the end, which was a bit of good luck. And then at his matriculation ceremony, he was invited to sit next to him at dinner, which he said it was just exactly what I'd always hoped for. I said, well, you did put a lot of work into making sure so you can see these are kids who are hugely passionate, would go to those lengths, because a lot of children would not put that time and effort in, but you can help guide them if they're interested. It's quite a nice thing to sit down on the internet with a cup of coffee and spend an hour with them browsing, looking at what's out there. Kids do not naturally know, and schools, however good the school is and however much you're paying or not paying, they're dealing with hundreds of children. They don't have the time or inclination to look after your child like you do. I've been right behind both of them in this journey, and although I have no teaching skills, I think it's more than compensatable, but I've actually really sort of helped them find a way forward.
Final question. There's a big debate right now and kind of division of opinion if the education system and parents have lowered academic standards and academic expectations, and others actually believe quite the opposite, that children are in fact facing too much pressure and too much stress. What is your view? I would love to hear it. And how do we set the bar just right?
It goes back to my last answer. It depends where you're coming from. If you've got a particularly capable child, you'll say it's too easy. If you've got a child that struggles, you'll say it's too hard. You're both right. It's not a problem with education as it is. As I said, it's a weakness-based system. It has to fit everybody. It's best pitched in the middle. So all I can say, if you're at either end of the spectrum, if you're struggling or finding it easy, as a parent, you need to try and get involved a bit to either give your child extra stimulation, more rewarding work. And I know parents will say, oh, I'm too busy, I'm working. But you think, well, you did have these children, and this is part of being a mum and a dad. that you have to have a bit of a buy-in into their future. You can't just say, I'm too busy. And equally, if they're struggling at the other end, you have to improvise. Don't expect schools to carry you through everything. But no, I think having done, like I said, 11 GCSE subjects, all the traditional ones, it's all there. It's just we don't realise it. It's us who's the problem, not the curriculum, not what's there. I've read specifications for every subject in every exam board. I've read every textbook, and it's all fantastic. It's all really there to be had and enjoyed and developed. It depends. It's your perception of it. And there's always people who undermine it. We want to get rid of GCSEs. We want to change this. We want to change that. You've got to fit everybody. And it is, I think, the best way to fit everybody. You know, to me, I've broken down the demarcation for my kids between school and home. Learning is something they enjoy and do for fun. And I think that is probably the biggest achievement. And I would have come away from the whole thing thinking, I wish I'd been home educated. I wish I'd have such a buy-in to my studies that they do. But it's all part of the environment, of my positive attitude towards helping them get there. And I know it's different. Schools probably can't do it, but I wish they could just take some of the school, you know, the education system is always a bit suspicious of home educators. We're the sort of odd ones on the side. There's so much schools could learn from home education. They really could benefit from seeing some of the approaches get results out of children who would really struggle in mainstream schools. So on that, I'm really pleased that we made the right choice.
Well, Emma, it was so interesting to hear from you. You've, I think, given us so much advice from a perspective of a home educator, also from a perspective of a parent who has supported their children, their particular strengths and talents, and on top of it, who has gotten the very highest results that I think any parent on the planet would dream of, sending her kids to Oxford and Cambridge. Thank you so much, Emma. This has been a wonderful conversation, so insightful, and I've learned so much from listening to you. Thank you. Thank you for coming and for sharing your ideas. And hopefully we'll see you another time. Thank you for watching. If you're enjoying this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future videos.